Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's NSA Connect session, The Trauma of Stuttering, Building Resilience and Hope Through Understanding and Experience, with two esteemed facilitators, Heather Najman and Dr. Eric Mendoza. If you two would like to introduce yourselves and take it away.
Eric, would you like to begin?
Yes, sure. I will start. Good evening, everybody, and much respect to everybody on the East Coast for showing up at 8:30 p.m. Yeah, thank you. I am, as mentioned, Dr. Eric Mendoza. I am a clinical psychologist, a lifelong stutterer, and this is actually my first orientation into the NSA, and already I am just overwhelmed with gratitude to just hear already some of the communication with each other, just to have found a community that I've looked for and didn't know was here for so long. So just very excited to be here. I am the creator of an affinity and skills group at Ohio State University called Own Your Voice. And this was specifically for students who attended that university who had a stutter. So again, excited to be here.
Thank you, Eric. My name is Heather Najman. I have been a member of the NSA for probably over 30 years, been a co-chapter leader, been a co-host on Stutter Social, presenter on stress and stuttering and somatics. I work as a psychotherapist in private practice with folks with early trauma, PTSD, stress, anxiety, things like that. And there's a lot more that I could say, but I'll just keep it at that. And usually when I work slower and quieter than I will tonight. We have a lot to cover, and so I may be talking faster than I usually would, just because we have so much that we want to share with you tonight, both Eric and myself. So that being said, we wanted to start, and this might sound a little strange, we wanted to start by giving you time to arrive. Giving yourself time to land right here, whether you're here with us live or whether you're listening to this later, knowing that you have all the time in the world, because we have right here, right now. I'm going to take a moment and land. There's all of a sudden, right as I started to talk, there's all kinds of noise outside my window, and music playing and all kinds of things, and my attention got drawn out there. So I'm just going to bring it right back here. And I invite you to feel your feet on the ground, or if they're up in the air. But if they're on the floor, notice which foot feels more connected to the ground. Is it your right or your left? So just getting curious. So I like things that rhyme, and I heard this phrase many years ago: to feel your feet and find your seat. So I also invite you to find your sit bones, and you might need to do a little wiggle back and forth or forward and back, but to find your sit bones, if you think of it like a cereal bowl or a fruit bowl, that which is sitting on the chair, the sofa, the couch, wherever you are, the rocking chair. So feel your feet and find your seat. Just letting yourself drop in and arrive You may notice that you're tired. You may notice some curiosity, some excitement, some what's going to happen. You may notice some stress that you've been carrying, whether this week or today, as a sensation. You may feel some spaciousness or some constriction, but just right now, feeling your feet, finding your seat, and noticing where your breath is. You don't have to change it. And we would ask that you keep yourself on mute while we're talking. We will have time at the end, but just so that we can keep things moving. So notice where your breath is. You don't have to change it. All right. So now that you've landed, now that you've arrived, Eric is going to start us off.
Thank you, Heather. I realized I needed that too, so thank you. So we're going to start with trauma. And so this is going to be a presentation on trauma. And just with that, we wanted to let everybody know that to take care of yourself and whatever that means for you. If this looks like you shutting your screen off, if you taking a moment to just step away, we will be talking about some potentially traumatic content as well. And so just really invite you all to do whatever you need to do to feel good and to feel safe and to feel comfy. If that looks like you going and finding a blanket, we just invite you all just to take care of yourself. So starting with, what is trauma? Trauma is a lasting emotional response that occurs when we experience a distressing event that is difficult to cope with, or we feel is out of our control. It could be one incident, and this is often what we think of when we think of trauma, I believe, which is that really big incident like a PTSD combat veteran where they were in war and maybe their soldier friend got killed, that really big trauma. In addition, it can also be an ongoing event that happens over a long period of time. So this might be situations of bullying or situations of these little things where we learn that stuttering maybe isn't okay. This is more of that ongoing event. One indication to kind of know if something is still a lasting emotional response is when you look back at a memory and you can almost still feel that ickiness that shows up. You can still almost feel it in your body. That is a good indicator that this is a trauma, as that lasting emotional response is still there. I can look back at when I was a student in high school and I had a severe block when I was doing a presentation and couldn't recover from it. And that same memory I still think back on and still kind of gives me a sense of that, like that almost urge to kind of cover up. And so this is a good indication that this was a long-lasting emotional response that is still there.
Thanks, Eric. I want to share a quote from one of the premier clinicians, teachers in trauma, Peter Levine, who has developed a modality called somatic experiencing. And Peter said, what I do know is that we become traumatized when our ability to respond to a perceived threat is in some way overwhelmed. This inability to adequately respond can impact us in obvious ways as well as ways that are subtle. So trauma is typically thought of as, something big, whether it's combat, war, sexual assault, earthquake, gunshot, things like that. But there are now looking at different forms of trauma. And we're going to talk about big T trauma versus little t trauma. So we're going to talk about shock trauma, or just very, very briefly. Shock trauma is event-based. There was a before, we're doing okay, hanging in there, doing all right, something happens, and then oof, there is an after. There is something that gets worse, right? So I think we've all had shock traumas. It can be like those big things I just mentioned. It can also be things like falls. We fell off our bike. We had a skiing accident. It can be illness. It can be death or a loss. So there are things where there was a before and a after. We're going to be talking tonight about something that is closer to developmental or early trauma, or they aren't the same. CPTSD, complex PTSD. Early trauma is typically can be in the womb, can be after birth, prenatal, perinatal, can be in early upbringing. Maybe it was a parent, maybe it was abusive, but maybe it was a lack of a parent being there. And that can be for many reasons. Maybe the parent was working 3 jobs and just couldn't be there. Maybe there was a medical issue at birth or young. So there's many reasons for this. And that is typically looked at between 0 and 6 years of age. Complex PTSD. PTSD is usually thought of as life-threatening, something big that happened. It's now being broadened a bit. And little t trauma, which is what we're going to be talking about more tonight, is like death by 1,000 paper cuts. It happens repeatedly over and over and over again. Gee, sounds like our experience of stuttering, eh? Where we're having these incidents where multiple times a day, we don't know if what we're going to say is going to come out of our mouths. There's that loss of control. There's that variability. There's that anticipation. Will I get a negative reaction? What's going to happen? These things are happening to us over and over and over again. So I and Eric, our kind of theory is that the trauma of stuttering is like complex PTSD, because we have these things happen to us over and over and over again. Trauma has become so commonplace, again from Peter Levine, that most people don't even recognize its presence. Each of us has had a traumatic experience at some point in our lives, regardless of whether it's left us with an obvious case of post-traumatic stress, because trauma symptoms can remain hidden for years after a triggering event. Some of us who have been traumatized are not yet symptomatic. So when our sense of survival is threatened from a young age, we have survival physiology on board. And when it happens when we're young, 0 to 6, for example, that survival physiology starts getting wired in, and that becomes normal for us. And we're going to talk more about the stages of that, where our sympathetic nervous system, our charge, is running the show without a solid grounding in the parasympathetic, or the part of our nervous system that helps us rest and digest, or tend and befriend and relax. So Eric now is going to talk a little bit about some of the traumatic stuttering treatments we've had.
Exactly. So I don't know if since the beginning, but dating back a very long time, there has been a desire to treat and essentially stop the stuttering to some significant lengths. And some of these reasons, as Heather mentioned, is it can be very traumatic to live a life as a person who stutters. So this is labeled from pebbles to psychoanalysis, that stuttering dates back to biblical times, with Moses being a person who stutters. And even then, there was this trauma and shame, as Moses considered it a punishment. And it was God that shared that I wouldn't have, I think something mentioned about like, but I have made you as a mistake. 300 BC, we look at the treatment of, and I'm going to probably butcher all of these names, so I'm sorry now, Demosthenes, who, with the famous Greek actor, his treatment was to put a bunch of pebbles in his mouth and to declaim passionately as he walked continuously up a hill. Not to be outdone, we have the royal physician Aetius of Amida 900 years later, where they came up with the brilliant idea of dividing the frenulum. And if you're not sure what that is, if you just look in a mirror and you go like this with your tongue, you stick your tongue at the top of your mouth, you'll notice there is a membrane that connects it. And that's what they sliced. And then we move into the 6th century, where in Europe there was a phase where they would, as you see down here, chop a wedge in their tongue and put a divider like in there to reduce the stuttering. And then we move into the American method, where the American method was to put the tip of the tongue at the top of the mouth. And so then people were speaking like this. And they went back, and the Americans said, no, like, we are going to do much more research. And they went back and they hit the books and they did these studies, and they said, okay, it's not the tip of the tongue, but you need to put the whole tongue to the top of your mouth. And obviously that also wasn't working out, right? So, not to be saved, then psychology kind of stepped in and said, okay, like, we got this. And their idea was, it was a collision between many ideas that were flowing simultaneously from the brain. And I remember hearing this often, which was essentially, well, you just think faster than you can talk. Emotions such as feeling bashful or shy, this caused interruptions associated with the movements of the organs of speech. And this was why stuttering occurred, and they needed to work on the emotions of, and then in a very Freudian way, it's mother's fault. So essentially, as a NSA survey actually was conducted, was that people who stutter attempt a variety of treatments to reduce or to manage it. Electroshocking, Botox, vitamins, motivational courses. They go through great lengths to avoid and reduce these traumas that come with being a person who stutters. And I won't get too much into the speech therapy, but there are these techniques and devices that also have been helpful, absolutely. And one thing I do want to focus on when it comes to a shift in the speech pathology kind of world is the shift from a person who stutters failing treatment if they continue to stutter, to a shift to being able to manage and living a meaningful life with a stutter. So what are some of the ramifications or the trauma of being a person who stutters? A study done in 2014 found that stuttering negatively can impact somebody's quality of life, their vitality and their desire and sort of energy to live, social functioning with social anxiety, that fear of perceived judgment. And this is a fear that is perpetuated by being a person who stutters. Public speaking is the number one fear on the planet above the fear of death. And so you couple that with being a person who stutters, and that social anxiety and fear of judgment is just more perpetuated overall. Emotional functioning and overall mental health are some of these ramifications or trauma responses of stuttering. And what you see at the top of stuttering might be what you see or hear, but it's not the whole story. Underneath that can be fear and shame and guilt and grief, hopelessness, isolation, anxiety. Other studies have shown that children can have a negative attitude toward themselves and others compared to fluent speakers, reported a lack of friendships compared to a non-stuttering child, more behavioral problems, and higher rates of bullying as well. Higher rates of shame have often been found, which is that sense of there is something wrong with me. Interestingly, though, the severity of the stutter, one study found, didn't really matter much. A quote, a mild stutterer may be suffering just as much or even higher than somebody that may be more visibly stuttering. And as a child gets older, and even as an adult, it's not often the overt stutter itself, but much more their impressions of their speaking abilities as a whole. And it makes sense why there is so much of this shame when we look at the stigma that comes with being a person that stutters. There are a lot of these negative stereotypes because of the societal stigma and common misconceptions. Many people who stutter try to hide their stuttering from others. They may, as we know, avoid using words that are harder, may choose to just not speak. In many situations, all with that fear of shame of how others will react to the fact that our speech sounds different. And again, why wouldn't we? One study looked at how stutterers were portrayed in the media and found only out of 3 out of 40 films portrayed a stuttering individual in a positive light. Usually it was in an exaggerated comedic role, or somebody that was experiencing low life satisfaction or in some way was just flawed. And the sad part is that people who stutter, research has found, can be highly aware of this and unfortunately also believe it. And this comes into another very important emotion coupled with shame for people who stutter, which is grief. And grief essentially equates to loss. People who stutter and parents of those who stutter may grieve the loss of typical speech fluency and may go through the grief cycle, which is often referred to as DABDA, which is denial, anger, depression, bargaining, and acceptance. The important thing to note is that it isn't a linear thing. We don't just go through this step by step, but it's much more like the experience you see on the right, which is all over. So you might be in a place of acceptance, and then one day you're looking back and you're angry about something or in denial, and that is very normal. There is no right way to grieve.
So one of the things about grief and stuttering that you may have found in your journey is that you may have experienced some grief over what was, maybe lost jobs, or you lost a relationship, whether it was a significant relationship, whether it was a parental, spouse, friendship. You may be grieving that loss of normalcy, and I say normalcy in quotes, but other fluent people don't have to think about all the things that we think about. They don't have to work as hard as we do. It takes a lot of effort. So that sense of like, man, I wish it wasn't so much work. And then sometimes there is that grief about loss of potential, whether that's with a job, whether that's again with relationships, but thinking about what could have been or what might have been. So just know that these are all normal reactions to have as one goes through one's stuttering journey, as one starts to unpack what we feel about things, is that sadness and grief can definitely come up. So I'd like us all just to again feel your feet and find your seat. We've thrown out a lot here very quickly, especially talking about Sheehan's iceberg and all of those feelings, the fear, the guilt, the shame, anxiety. And so again, just bring yourself back to present moment here. Okay. So I'm going to share now from Stephen Porges, a researcher who has developed over the last several decades the polyvagal theory. And what this is that this is a theory about the autonomic nervous system whose function is survival. And we have and we will get into this more as we go. We have two parts. We have a sympathetic, and I always thought it was weird being called sympathetic because you think, oh, sympathy. The sympathetic is the charge. It's like something happens. If we were back on the Sahara and a twig snapped, we would turn, we would look, we would hear it, and we would go, is that something coming to eat me? Or is that something that, that I can go eat? And am I going to be dinner, or did I just find dinner? So something happens and we instantly scan for threat. And then once wait, it's a little, I don't know what would be small on the Sahara, mouse of some kind. Then our parasympathetic helps bring us back down. So important polyvagal work looks at these stress responses, and I'm sure many of you have heard of fight or flight response. When something happens, we can get ready to fight, or I'm out of here. There's a third one that is a freeze response, and it is our curiosity, our wondering if we who stutter kind of live in a perpetual state of freeze. There are other responses that are being looked at, fight, flight, freeze, or please, or fawning, which is kind of a caretaking, people pleasing. But for tonight's work, we're going to be talking about fight, flight, and freeze. And fight can run the gamut from frustration to irritation to anger to rage. Flight can be, I'm worried, I'm anxious, I'm feeling fear, I'm panicked. Procrastination falls in here too. And freeze, which on this chart is up at the top. Other charts, you'll see freeze goes down underneath, like you would think a freeze would just be like slow moving. Freeze being an energy conservation state where we're feeling helpless, we're starting to feel kind of numb, we might feel depressed, we might start feeling disassociation. Again, shame comes in here and shut down, hopeless and helpless, trapped. So when I first heard about this, I went, oh, stuttering, hello. Because in that, I think that there's that pushing, and then there is that breeziness that, like, we're so busy thinking about what to say that we've lost our connection with our listener. But we'll get more into that in a bit. Eric.
Thank you. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this sympathetic state, which again, this is that fight or flight. So this is a very old nervous system state that we have 400 million years old. And again, the function of it is all about survival. It is a mobilizer. So meaning it is going to make you move, essentially. It's going to put you in a state of fight or a state of flight. Now, imagine right now, out of the corner of your eye, you see like a slither that kind of looks like a snake. Ask yourself, what do you think is the first thing that you might do? Some of us might be saying, well, I'm out of there. I'm jumping up. I'm running away. Some of us might say, I'm going to throw something at it. But most of us, what is going to occur is we are going to take that inhale. The inhale is what activates this sympathetic state of fight or flight. And so we would most likely, which is going to start up, our heart rate is going to kick in, adrenaline is going to come out, cortisol, these chemicals that mobilize us. Our pupils are going to dilate so we can see more threats. Our focus is going to hone in. Our heart rate is going to spike up. Our fingers and our toes are going to get colder as the blood rushes away from our fingers and toes to our heart rate, so we can pump out more blood so we can either run away or fight. And we are going to go into a mobilized state. And it's a good thing that we do, right? There is a threat there. There is a snake right there. I don't have time to answer, I wonder if this is a friendly snake. Oh, I wonder if it's just a hose or a toy. Our nervous system's job is to keep us safe. And so it is going to put us up into that fight or flight. And then maybe later we will notice it wasn't a snake. And then the parasympathetic, that rest and digest, will come on. But it's a good thing that this fight or flight kicked on. When we're in this state as well, we are scanning for potential danger. We are in a state of survival, mobilizing. So when we're in a high fight or flight state, we are perceiving things as threats. So even connection can feel threatening. And this is really important when we think of stutters and the act of just speaking or having to publicly speak. It is going to elevate this fight or flight, which will affect our perceptions of safety. And Heather will speak more on that.
So that leads us to talking about stuttering stress. And part of the reason we talked about these physiological states is that affects our perspective. That affects how we see the world. If our physiology is telling us danger, 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 then we're going to be reacting as if the world is not a safe place. And stuttering, as we mentioned before, can be felt as a series of constant traumas or micro traumas. Sometimes it's big, let's be honest, and sometimes it's small, but that feeling helpless, that feeling out of control, having negative reactions from other people, stigma, all of those things are like that 1,000 paper cuts I mentioned. Eric mentioned that the perception of trauma, the perception of impact isn't based on stuttering severity. You can stutter what would categorize as mildly, but it impacts tremendously. Vice versa, someone might be stuttering as some might say really, really well, stuttering a lot, stuttering out there, letting it out. And it's not that big a deal. So we can't judge whether or not stuttering is traumatic just by the level of stuttering severity or the level of fluency. Stuttering stressors our hypothesis mirrors traumatic reactions. What in the trauma world might be PTSD, for example, fireworks or a car backfiring to a veteran. For us, phone rings. Well, what happens? Breath goes in, heart rate goes up, and then phone is ringing. Now with phones being, ability to put on vibrate, there's less of that. But I think we all have experienced that when our phone rings, that's kind of a PTSD because we go, what's going to happen? Will I be able to answer it? Intrusive thoughts or flashbacks. We may ruminate on painful speaking situations we've had. Whether it was that date we didn't get, or going around the room at work, or 1,000, a million. It's people think, well, you pick examples. We live with this every day, so there can be a million examples. Anxiety can be that sort of low-level hum, or it can be high-level anxiety that anticipating listener reactions. So, as soon as I started to read about PTSD many years ago, I went, oh my gosh, we who stutter can go through this. It's different, but it's very, very parallel. So, how can stuttering be considered traumatic? Is it the stutter itself? Like I said, some people stutter very well, have a lot of it, but it's okay. And others less so. So, is it the stutter or is it our reaction to it? Now, when we have more resilience on board, more regulation on board, we have more capacity to manage it. And we'll get more into that in a bit. What can also be traumatic is reactions of other people. The look, that sort of Scooby-Doo look of that sort of head tilted, like, what's going on here? And those reactions can be overt. Someone says something or does something, or just the very subtle micro facial expressions. But again, because we have these day after day after day, those can build up. One of the things that helps influence if something is traumatic or not is, were we alone with these feelings? Did we have a compassionate, safe witness? And for many of us, especially who had started stuttering when we were young, we didn't have that. Especially if our parents or caregivers should have been that witness, and they didn't know what was going on, and they had a reaction, or our teachers, or friends at school, or peers. So when we don't have anybody to sit with us and be like, that was really hard, that's going to be more traumatic than if we have somebody safe with us that can be and hold presence with us. That Kane and Terrell, Kathy Kane and Stephen Terrell, in their book Nurturing Resilience, which I would recommend especially for anti-speech language pathologists here, talk about that social engagement supports and that social engagement supports and builds developmental neurological programs that help us feel that foundational sense of safety. Another way that stuttering can be traumatic, not only reactions of other people, but our own internal critic or bully. And I happen to like Lucy here, and Lucy's saying, "Who's your inner critic?" And I think that we are our own worst critic. We are our own worst bully. So again, if we, so just I just want to leave that there for your consideration. So how does this all tie in? So I've been curious about, when we push through stuttering blocks, is that a fight response? I think it might be. I think when we get into that perfectionism and people pleasing, that might be the fawn response, which is a survival stress response. That avoidance as a flight response. I've seen that in my life so many ways. Whether that was being silent. I got really good at listening growing up. Now, it helps me in my career because I listen to people. But I think many of us are really, really good at it. Many of us engage in word substitutions, circumlocution, or we put in crutch words or filler words. That's an avoidance. That is a flight response. And another way that I think avoidance shows up is lack of eye contact. And I have said for a number of years that, avoidance can become a way of life, not just a strategy. It's okay to visit, it's okay to go on vacation. We just don't need to live there. And all of these things, uh, Stephen Terrell and Kathy Kane in the Nurturing Resilience, and thank you, Bailey, for putting it in the chat there. Talk about management strategies, defensive accommodations, and these are things that we do to manage activation, whether it's substances, whether it's engaging in perfectionism, whether it's feeling anxious, whether it's smoking cigarettes, there's all kinds of behaviors, all kinds of things that we do that is our attempt to bring things back down. So I want to pose something that might be a little controversial, maybe not. And that is talking about eye contact. That keeping and breaking eye contact both can be a way to self-regulate. Keeping eye contact and having a safe person can be part of that ventral vagal, part of that helping us feel connected. But fluent people break eye contact all the time. Why do we insist on eye contact being maintained all the time in speech therapy or in the community? It can be a normal way to downshift activation. Now, breaking eye contact, and I happen to be really good at this one, can be an avoidance. It can be a way to not look at our listener. It can be a way to kind of go into a freeze state. So it can be an avoidance. It can be a freeze response. It can be or some mix of that. But it's a management strategy when things are too much. So if it's a management strategy, why do we pull it back and insist we must keep eye contact all the time? That takes a lot of effort and work as well, as opposed to letting it rise organically when there's a little bit of space, when there's a little bit of regulation on board, then the person can come back and rejoin. So again, I may be a heretic here, but I just want to question that insistence that thou shalt maintain eye contact at all times, because it's a normal way to manage when things get to be too much. So now we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, freeze and disassociation. Now you may be going, what? Disassociation, and I heard this from my colleague, Stephen Terrell. He says disassociation is not a dirty word, and I loved that. Disassociation is a survival response, and it exists on a spectrum. It can go from like, where are my keys, to that sort of a catatonic out of it reaction. But there's too much going on, there's too much activation, I need to kind of shut things down. And that's the immobilization. And I'm curious about whether people that stutter, whether our nervous systems are kind of living in a state of freeze, that we're so focused on either getting through the block, or we're so focused on what we're going to say that we miss the moment, we miss the presence, we miss the connection with the other people. Porges talks about social engagement, intent, and befriending, and Eric's going to talk a little bit about that. And Porges talks about safety, regulation, social engagement as a way to help mobilize. And my question was, well, what do you do when social engagement, talking with other people, becomes a source of terror rather than a source of comfort. Because that, like, oh, I have to talk. So normally engaging with other people would be comforting, would be sharing. But that's where I think we share commonality with folks with developmental trauma who often have some of the same things, where the people that were supposed to be caregivers and supposed to comfort us became a source of threat. So for us, when talking becomes a source of threat with other people rather than a way to bring things down. So, disassociation and the flight response of avoidance, they get a bad rap as being maladaptive. I don't think so. They have gotten us through some very difficult times. However, especially as we get older, there's a high cost of doing business. Porges talks about. It takes more and more resources, physiological resources, and there may be more gut issues later in life, more immune system issues, more health problems, because managing a physiology that's a high stress activation repeatedly takes its toll. There is a high cost. So when that form of coping no longer serves us, or when it causes more strain and drain, or more pulling our energy reserves, our bank account, then it may be a good time to pause, to reappraise, to figure out what our next option may be. So we're going to talk a bit about regulation. And Danny asked in the chat, what do you do when there's not a one specific memory, when it's constant and repeated? Regulation is really what we need to build. And regulation is the term used to describe our ability to manage our emotional state, to calm ourselves during times of heightened emotion. But it's not only calming down. It's our ability to manage whatever happens. It is an organic response, and this is from Stephen Terrell, an organic response to our environment created by our experiences. Why? To keep us safe. And there are different types of regulation: auto-regulation, self-regulation. Okay, I'm going to take a deep breath. There's co-regulation. Oh, when I'm in relationship with you, then I start to feel better. So, but regulation is what we're trying to do to keep ourselves safe. And our parents and caregivers played a really crucial role in helping develop that, or in not helping that develop. And so that when we were young, hopefully we were building co-regulation between caregiver and us as children, so that our nervous systems learned how to come back down. The fact that many of us started stuttering when we were very young makes me curious about, did we ever really get those systems on board? So again, tonight, I think we have more questions than we have answers, but we want to bring up some things to think about. Dan Siegel talks about a window of tolerance, and he's got a bunch of books, very good. Mindsighted is a good one. Parenting from the inside out is a very good one. But Siegel talks about, we all have a window of tolerance, that we can go up into hyper arousal, high energy, anxiety, anger, overwhelm, hypervigilance, We who stutter know hypervigilance. We're always scanning for words, right? Um, Hypo is shut down, numb, depression, passiveness, withdrawn, shame. And we're hoping to stay in the middle. Something happens, we respond to it, and we come back down. But for many of us, because speaking situations are every day, all day, or frequent, I wonder if we ever really come back down, or if we're either constantly living up here in fight or flight, or down here in freeze. So now I'm going to turn it back to Eric to talk about the ventral vagal system.
Thank you. So that ventral vagal system, that is very much this window of tolerance we are talking about, which is essentially what can you tolerate when the overwhelming things happen in life and the emotions come? Can you stay in this regulated state? Because life happens. Again, we absolutely need moments of fight or flight. You all being here, showing up on time, you needed some of that fight or flight. You needed some of that mobilizing to get you here on time. Fight or flight is a state that shows up when we care. You being engaged right now, you need a level of fight or flight to be able to focus. And so one thing we really want to hone in is that this is our physiology, our biology. Its whole goal is to work with us and to keep us safe. Due to traumas, it might get a little bit skewed and become hypersensitive. And its goal is still to keep us safe. Now, this state of safety is how I really like to view it, is this ventral vagal state. So this is that window of tolerance that we are talking about. It is the newest system that we have. It's only 200 million years old, and it's unique to mammals. And this is why you've seen apes, dogs, dolphins, humans, we interact with one another, we play, but you have never seen sharks and snakes playing. It's because they don't have this ventral vagal system. Only mammals do. And it is a system that protects through connection. It's all about connection. It's all about safety. It's the ability to soothe, the ability to be soothed. So if you think of an infant and your ability to soothe it and its ability to be soothed, the ability to be open-minded in the moment, it's compassionate, it's mindful, it's right here in the moment because it's safe enough to be right here in the moment. It's a sense of, this is when you are feeling a sense of curiosity or joy, you feel engaged. That's usually a good indication that you are in more of a ventral vagal state. I had a brief opportunity to look into the chat, and it's beautiful stuff that is going on. And there's a lot of vulnerability in there, which indicates that although there might be some of that sympathetic fight or flight, because to be vulnerable, you can get hurt, there's also this ventral state that's going on right now because there's safety enough to be vulnerable. And so I just think it's a beautiful thing. And so one way I like to give an example of how we are connected, because like Heather shared in the previous slide, our window of tolerance is not saying we're never anxious or angry or worried, or we're never exhausted and kind of shut down, dissociating even somewhat in that free state. That window of tolerance absolutely goes into both of those states. So I want us all to imagine that we are all in a car, I guess, all this fitting in there, and a car in front of us slants, and we have to stomp on the brakes and pull over. What this might look like if we are dysregulated, we are not in this ventral connected state and we just go into that sympathetic fight or flight, maybe I get out and I start to cuss out the person in front of me. I punch their window or something like that. I am completely dysregulated. I am in fight or flight. I am seeing red. If I'm purely in that state of freeze and I'm dysregulated, there's none of this green window of tolerance energy, maybe I just completely freeze and I'm hearing a buzzing. I go somewhere else. I'm not here. I've dissociated for my own safety. That's what that might look like. Now, what it might look like if I am connected to this ventral vagal state, this window of tolerance, is I slam, I pull over, and I go, oh, wow. So there's a moment of even that freeze. Maybe I pause for a moment. I can feel the intensity of my emotions. I'm in that fight or flight state. I'm absolutely terrified. I almost got into a crash and I go, is everybody okay? And I can have that moment to be in that fight or flight state, to be in that freeze state if need be. And at the same time, I am connected. And so this is really the goal that we are looking for, to go into a state of safety when it is okay to be in a state of safety. It's not always.
Thanks, Eric. And that is a echo of something coming ahead. Talking about lessening freeze and my sort of hypothesis that we are kind of living in a state of freeze. And thought is that when we back our car out of the garage, we hit that fight response first. And that anger, like, why didn't anybody tell me that there was something like the NSA, or anger at the way we were growing up or the way we were treated. So that anger is actually, we need that anger. We need that because anger can be a vital force to set boundaries. Now, what we do with that anger, we need to not take it out on other people, but we need that vital life force. So we often hit anger when we back the car out of the garage. We hit sadness. We hit lots of things, but that anger as the fight response and sadness often shows up first. I'm going to skip the next slide here. And then, so much in the field has been top down, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which has its place, challenging beliefs, challenging our thoughts. Oh, stuttering is so awful. I had a really bad day. No, I didn't have a bad day. I had a difficult day. I had a challenging day. It wasn't bad. That puts it in good and bad. There are things like motivational interviewing and ACT. Those are all really helpful tools. Those are top down. We're talking about more looking at, let's start with a bottom up approach that have some sort of somatic base. And soma means body. So body-based approach, which might mean somatic experiencing, might mean EMDR, mindfulness, transforming touch, DBT work. One thing I wanted to say is that people think mindfulness just means let's take 3 deep breaths. Well, for some people, taking a deep breath and slowing things down can trigger more anxiety, not less. So let's be careful with use of breath. Breath is a very powerful tool. Notice at the beginning, I didn't say take a deep breath. I said notice where your breath is. And for some of you, your breath may have just gone a little ways down to here. But for some of you, it may have been halfway, and some of you may have breathed down to your belly. So we notice rather than taking a deep breath. And one of the reasons why this is so important is that we can't think our way into safety. We can have all the thought challenging we want up here, but if our physiology is down here going, danger, danger, the world is not safe, We can't think our way into safety. Eric, go.
Yeah, so just to jump on that mindfulness train a little bit more, this is going to be now the section where we want all of us to kind of participate, even like just with yourself, if need be, like in the chat, whatever feels, again, most comfortable for you. But the goal is to increase your awareness of yourself and to, at the same time, learn a new skill that we hope is helpful. So as mentioned, mindfulness is a very hot buzzword right now, I think is the foundation of basically all therapeutic modalities. And the essence of it is to be aware. So it's only two parts: being aware in the present moment, which is very difficult for humans. We like to focus on the past, what happened, what I did. And we like to focus on the future, what I have to do, what is going on. And to be fair, this is why humans are so successful as a species. We are able to look back and learn, and we're able to look forward and to anticipate. And it sometimes makes us miserable because we're living in the past and we're living in the future. So mindfulness is being aware in the present moment. So that's one part. Again, sounds easy. It is absolutely a skill. And the other part is without judgment. I like to think of it more as to notice your judgments. So judgments being us labeling something as right or wrong or good or bad. And as Heather mentioned, I like this image on the right because I think it's a simple way to essentially explain what mindfulness is. Mindfulness is not clearing your mind. It is not essentially focusing on anything specific. It is about being in the moment, like this dog is here. And so again, just ask us all just to see if we can be open-minded and curious, and then also noticing any judgments, any thoughts that something is right or wrong or good or bad. The whole aim moving forward is we can't change something if we aren't aware of it. So one of the most important initial steps is to understand, and I love to say to own who you are, your story, your stuttering story, your story in general. And so a couple questions to ask yourself is what is your relationship with your stutter? How do you react when you stutter? What thoughts come up? How do you speak to yourself? What are you thinking that other people are thinking and viewing? How do you feel? Is there an urge to hide? Is there an urge to do you notice any of that fight or flight energy, any of that freeze energy? How do you try and fix your speech? Personally, for myself, I grew up throughout childhood and most of adolescence and young adulthood as being very ashamed, as a lot of trauma came from having a stutter. I learned it simply was not okay to stutter. To cope with this, how I fixed it was I was more of a perfectionist. I had to do everything like the right way. At work, I was the individual who took on all of these extra shifts. I went the extra mile. I took on more and more work. My needs were always second. It did help to make me successful. And I think a lot of stutterers, maybe somebody out here knows, maybe even some research on it, are highly successful people for, I think, this reason, as it is a way to cope. But again, so my needs were kind of second, and it was with the emphasis of to hear the words "good job," essentially, that really validated my sense of worth, my self-worth. So as long as I was working harder than everybody else, then I was worthy enough, even if I had a stutter. I have clients I work with now and treat with a stutter, and there is a hyperfixation and focus on not stuttering and their techniques to help them not stutter, that the function of it is essentially if they're focusing on how not to stutter and a way not to stutter, then they don't have to focus on the painful grief and shame that is underlying all of that trauma there. And why I mention this is it's not until we own who we are and what's there that we can truly change it. It's not until we own what's there until we can really heal from it. Essentially, I used to compare myself to others. Now I attempt to connect with others, those that deserve to connect with me. Again, is it safe to? A switch from pride to having a stutter, and at the same time, absolutely having moments and parts of myself that also still grieve and hold on to shame and trauma as well. So the skill that we will be talking about today is the basic skill. So it is an acronym because psychology loves acronyms overall. And so we are going to transition into a skill that can help us to heal and navigate our nervous system overall. So the first part of this skill is to befriend your experience. It starts with tapping into our nervous system with an attitude and understanding that we've been talking about this whole time, that your nervous system is working for you, not against you. It's that same example of a snake. Now, let's say that there is a snake outside of your door. There should be some of that mobilizing anxiety energy there. And it's important that you have that because you don't want to walk outside of your door all willy-nilly. It's important that you are a little bit anxious about it. So when you step out, you're a little bit hypervigilant. And so our nervous system, again, is doing exactly what it should do to keep us safe from its understanding. It's important to our nervous system when we think of our trauma of stuttering as well. Essentially, it's saying, hey, be careful. Remember last time you spoke and stuttered that you got burned in some way in the past. I'm looking out for you. Understanding first and foremost, our nervous system is there to protect us, will allow us to have more control and also to reduce the reactivity that we have for it. And so befriending is learning to tune in towards our nervous system states with a sense of curiosity and self-compassion. And that self-compassion is really key. Self-compassion is kindness. And if it's hard to be kind to ourselves, as we talked about, we absolutely are our biggest critics. How would you speak to somebody that you love? One of the most impactful things that has come from my stuttering and healing journey is I have a very young daughter who now has a stutter. And I am able to love her and to heal her in a way that the childhood me like never got. And so that self-compassion, how can you treat yourself like somebody that you love? There's also the sense in self-compassion of common humanity. Often, you might feel like we're the only ones that feel like that in the moment, especially being a person who stutters. Like, I think that's why this community is so fantastic, as it brings a lot of people with a common identity together, because often it's very isolating. And that common humanity is, yes, I am human. I am having a human reaction. I am not alone. And then, as always, mindfulness, that ability to be present in the moment as well.
Thank you, Eric. Sharing about your experience with your daughter. Oh, that you can be present for her and with her in a way that you weren't maybe present with. That's really the essence, the heart of what we are talking about tonight, that ability to be present with another person, to be there and to not try to change her, not try to make something different, just as she is, and to accept her with love and compassion and unconditionalness. That's not really a word, but it is now. That is so important for healing. I want to talk a little bit about the A for attending, to attend to our activated nervous system. It is harder to use speech tools, corrections, block management, whatever it is, when we are in that fight or flight or the freeze zone. And I can remember well-meaning speech therapists saying, "Oh, if you can do it in here, you can do it out there." And she meant well, God bless. But when I couldn't do it out there, I felt shame. Well, that's because I was in this fight or flight and somewhat disassociated state. And when we're in that, when we're not in that ventral vagal parasympathetic zone, well, no, ventral vagal is different than parasympathetic. When we're not in a connected, grounded place, it's going to be harder to use those tools. So that's why we want to really bring home some of this piece so that we can start finding our way there, because then it's going to be easier. Because when we're in that fight, flight, or freeze, our prefrontal cortex is offline. And our prefrontal cortex is the thinking part. That's the logic. That's like, I know what to do, but why couldn't I do it? Folks that say, well, you just have to work harder, that's not likely to work. That we need to digest, metabolize pieces of success, pieces of parasympathetic work. So we invite you to notice your breath. Lots of times when people start to go in, they notice where's tense, but they forget to notice where's less tense. Now, notice I didn't say notice where's calm, because for many of us, there is no calm place inside, because inside it's either all doing tension, stress, and constriction. So instead of looking for where's calm, which may not exist, let's look for where's maybe less tense. You know, if our main tension is at a 8, let's look for a 6. Let's look for something that's different. That's something that can help us then start to expand our body language, so we can start building a safety map when we have a really good danger map on board.
So we're going to do just a brief practice of attending right now. I'm just going to show some images, just two, and just invite everybody just to notice, what occurs in your body, if anything changes, noticing again your thoughts, any judgments if you have. We're not looking to do anything. We are just noticing here, and feel free to share what you notice in the chat. I'll show each image for about 20 seconds or so. Some are feeling cold. Feels like an angry sea. It's rough. Chaos, terrifying, turbulence, sensations of drowning. Yeah. Great power emotions. Yeah. Noticing some tightness in the chest. There's a threatening, yeah. Notice where you can feel that threatening in your body. if anywhere. There's darkness, but there's light as well. Yeah, somebody found a ship in the background. Powerless.
And now let's see the next one, Eric.
Just notice if there's any changes. Serenity, peace, tranquility, immediate calm. Yeah. Beauty, cold.
So we might ask, and I say we, Eric and I might ask, how do you know those things? How are you experiencing those in your body right now? That serenity, that calm. Do you have a sense of spaciousness in your chest, or are you feeling warm, or what's going on inside that you're noticing a difference with this second picture?
Maybe just in the breath. Ease, yes. Lightness in the shoulders, absolutely. Thank you all for participating. And again, just noticing what an image might how that might shape your experience overall. And so the S in the basic scale is being able to shape your experience. So when we're not in that ventral vagal state, again, that window of tolerance, as Heather mentioned, life is exhausting. We're constantly in that state of fight or flight. And what occurs, like when we're constantly in the state of fight or flight, we immediately hit that free state because it's so overwhelming. And this might result in physical ailments. This might result in sickness, mental health issues, like overall. But typically, individuals I treat and what I share is psychotherapists, we treat the nervous system overall. If you go and see a podiatrist, they are going to treat your feet, a dentist, your mouth. Psychotherapists, I believe, treat the nervous system overall. And to shape your experience, sometimes it's these small steps towards mobilizing. That is exactly what is needed. So I'll let Heather speak a little more on this.
So we're going to just talk briefly, and yet this is not new, okay? So grounding, like we've done, feel your feet and find your seat, find your cereal bowl or your fruit bowl, what you are sitting on. Things like the five senses, 5 things that you see around you, 4 things that you hear, 3 things that you can touch, 2 things that you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. Something I want to leave with you, the power of the pause. And I put the little pet pause here, but the power of the pause, taking a beat. Before you respond, just taking a second. Taking a moment to come back to your breath. Just to come back to right here, right now. We don't have to hurry and rush. And I don't just mean speaking. I mean for whatever situation, whenever we find ourselves activated. Because we think that sometimes we have to have big things for healing, where healing actually happens in the little, small, quiet moments. We want to find fun. We want to find, as Deb Dana talks about, glimmers. Find the sparkle. Find the things that bring us pleasure, that bring us joy, that bring us excitement and aliveness. That also helps build regulation. And now on to the I, integration. And boy, we are running short on time here, so we're going to move real quick through these last few pieces.
So the Coregulation is essentially saying that now that we are aware, now that we have the ability to befriend and to move inward with a sense of self-compassion and curiosity, now that we are able to attend to what is happening, now that we are able to shape, we can integrate all of these things where we have the control and the power to move up and down this hierarchy as we please. Now, for some of us, it doesn't look like this, where it's not a third, and a third. For some of us, maybe our sympathetic state, that fight or flight, is 80%, and our other small bit is that free state. What Heather mentioned are those glimmers, are those moments where we catch ourselves in this ventral window of tolerance state. And the idea is, when you catch yourself in those moments of curiosity and compassion and calmness and mindfulness, that we really hone in on that. And the more we hone in on it, we spread it out. And this is how we adjust our own personal kind of nervous system state to increase our green zone and reduce those other zones. Again, when we are safe enough to be in that state.
When we have a sense of safety, or when there's less activation on board, then we have more energy available and we can make different choices. Whether it's choices to use a control or a technique, but it can be a choice of whether I'm going to react to this person or not, or whether I realize they may be having a bad day, or they may just not know what's going on. Peter Levine says, trauma is not what happens to us, but what we hold inside in the absence of an empathetic witness. So having somebody that can witness and be with us, witnessing and witnessing is important.
The last part of the basic skill is connection, and intentional connection is key here. So gratitude, daily gratitude practice, journals, lists, asking yourself right now, what are 3 things that you are grateful for right now? So just take a moment and just reflect on that for yourself. And again, just notice, just attend to if anything shifts at all. Compassion, as we have been talking about, compassion statements, the practice of to give and to receive. Again, one helpful way is, how would you treat somebody that you care about, a loving friend? Can you offer yourself any of that? Often we are critics, and the reasoning is that there is a maladaptive belief that if I'm harsh on myself, that this is what I need to motivate myself. If I mess up and say, oh, you're stupid, that will motivate me, compared to saying I made a human mistake and it's okay. Self-compassion does not equate to an excuse. And there's a lot of research that shows that. Lastly, just want to talk about awe. Awe moments. So making your own reservoir of awe is really important. Creating these moments of awe, of feeling connected to something that is bigger than ourselves. Nature, music, anything that sort of helps you to feel grounded and has that moment of awe. In essence, with connection, we can work to shift our focus to how meaningful and rewarding speaking and communicating can be with someone, instead of how painful it might be.
And lastly, with the C, we want to just mention connection and community. That, as we've been talking about, connection fosters safety. That we can connect with chapter meetings, national conference, regional conference, St. Louis next year, Facebook groups, Stutter Social, and NSA Facebook groups, and like you're on tonight, NSA Connects. And from the website, it's impossible to describe how powerful it is to spend 4 days with the majority of people you talk with stutter. They understand what it's like to live with a stutter every day and achieve success in life. So in closing, trauma may not be something that we get over, but we have ways in which it no longer consumes us. That we can't change our past, but we can change our capacity to manage it. We can change our ability to regulate our nervous system, to have more space, to have more breathing room, and by building regulation, to have more connection with ourselves and with others in our life. So get support, find a group, join the community, work on regulation with mental health support slowly and gently. It doesn't happen in one session, doesn't happen in a day. It's done bit by bit, bite by bite. To quote the NSA, you are not alone. So thank you very much. And we have our contact information on this last slide. So thank you for coming. And Jeremiah is like, yes, he has was a speaker at the oh, I've just had a brain freeze. My capacity just went to the top, but he has the best smile. So thank you all. And we've tried to keep up with some questions in the chat here. Pam, how are we doing?
Well, it's after 10 on the East Coast. So if people still want to stick around for a few minutes, if anybody's got any questions that have not been answered, certainly raise your hand. I don't want to presume, Heather and Eric, that you have time. But
I
that's
guess
yeah.
for some time, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So do we want to stop the screen share so we can
Oh yes.
yeah, we
Yes.
can see people raising
So we
their
can
hand.
see people.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So iPhone 2, I'm not sure who that is. Well, let's take Danny's question until we can sort out who iPhone 2 is. Danny?
Yeah. Hi there, Heather.
Hey, Danny.
Thank you to Dr. Mendoza as well. I'm wondering because as a person who stutters and hasn't met someone who's stuttered until they're 25 years old, I wasn't given the opportunity to be given this information at an earlier age, which is a real shame. And so I'm wondering if there is more than behavioral techniques, and if you would recommend any other types of counseling, because I guess I just think about, and I'll make this really short because I know we have other people that want to speak, but I think about my life in two parts, fighting my stutter and not taking chances on myself, and then really learning and starting a journey towards acceptance. And there's a sense of mourning that I have that feels like it has to be worked through for the former stage of like kind of what I'm talking about, not as much of like a behavioral modality. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So behavioral modalities are beneficial, absolutely, in terms of the exposure and sort of in some ways to learn how to face some of those fears and stuff. But I think what's really important to know is that when we are working with trauma, it is not enough just to talk about something. It's not enough just to talk about something and to feel something, because what occurs when we start to get into trauma work, I like to like think of it as like a river. At the top of it, it might look like it's nice and calm. Underneath it, as we get into that work, we don't know what's under there. There could be currents, there could be animals and things like that. And it's that same thing. When we start to get into something, our nervous system is going to again do its job. And if we get dysregulated, there's nothing we gain from it. It's only traumatizing. And so what I like to say is we need to be able to talk and to feel it, and also to control ourselves enough that we are in that window of tolerance at the same time. And that's how we heal. So essentially, it's important to have those behavioral skills and techniques and somatic techniques to regulate our body. I like to think of this as like floaties and a life vest. So when we go into that trauma work, we are safe, that we dip in a toe and we notice how that feels. And then if that feels okay, then we go in more. But we should never just dive in, because there's just no need to dysregulate ourselves if it's not going to be beneficial.
I want to add,
go ahead, sorry.
add something, Eric. Stuttering cuts us off from people, right? Stuttering disconnects us. And so part of the reason we recommend psychotherapy, whether that's with a psychologist, a counselor, mental health counselor, there's the social worker, there's lots of folks, is to repair, build the relation, whether it's a relationship with oneself or relationships with other people. That's what has gotten bumped around, banged up, and sometimes ripped apart with stuttering. So it's helping to repair, and in some cases build the platforms of safety that never got there in the first place when things happened when we were young. So there are lots of ways to do that are relational in therapy. That's because the biggest intervention, and more SLPs know this now, the biggest intervention is the relationship, not any technique, is the relationship, the believing in your client, and for us believing in ourselves so we can do something. So we could say a whole bunch more, but that's a short answer to a great question. There's iPhone 2. Are you around?
Ah,
You're
I
up.
am, everyone. Hi.
Yeah,
How are you all?
you're
Good,
doing wonderful.
good.
So, 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 so my has been is for Heather.
Okay.
So, so I'm so 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 earlier her mention someone mentioned was talking about flight mode. Or light.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that when and I blah 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 block on words. I've noticed that becomes a lot more for me. In my case, how can I avoid as trauma? And I blah 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 block on words if I'm in fight flight mode. Is this making any sense so far?
What I heard you ask, and correct me if I'm wrong, is how can you avoid further trauma during a a a a speech block if you're battling in fight or flight mode? Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Well, first thing, and that is a really unfortunately, we don't have the time to really give that the fullness of the answer. But the first piece is to recognize what you have. Oh, it's what's happening. I'm in fight mode, or I'm in, avoidance. And so taking a pause, taking a beat, finding a breath, finding your presence. Am I so focused on what I'm saying that I've lost connection with my listener? Do I need to come back and connect to myself? So recognition, and building your own regulation skills and building your own relationship with yourself will start to then give you a bit more space, bit more capacity. But yes, recognition that this is happening is the first thing. Then we take those small steps, those small bites, going out in nature, cold water, whether it's cold water on the face, help reset our vagus nerve, drinking cold water, taking a beat. There's lots of things that can work on this. And perhaps we can have a part two, or we can, if you reach out, we can help you find a person you can work with. So yeah, I'm sorry, that's such a short answer.
Oh, you're fine. And uh, actually, this is my first ever NSA meeting, so
Awesome.
I'm just happy to I found you guys because I need help. And it's
Well,
like, yeah,
we're glad you're here. Welcome to the NSA.
th- 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 thanks, Heather.
All
Thank you
right.
so much.
And thank you all. We know we have run over. Pam, thank you for letting us run over. Before we finish tonight, I just want to wish Pam a very happy birthday. It is Pam's birthday, and she needs to get to bed. So thank you all for coming. Eric, thank you so much. It's been a joy working with you. And we hope to see you around. And hopefully a few things tonight landed and give you something to something to think about. Eric had our contact information on the last slide. We can also put that in the chat. Thank you, Eric. So
I'll also add in the chat really quickly.
okay, thank you all.
And
And
thank you, Heather, and thank you, Dr. Mendoza. I asked if you two would be willing to do something, and this like far exceeded expectations. One of our most highly attended sessions. So,
Awesome.
thank you so much. Much appreciated.
Thank you all.
Have a good night. Be well.
Take care, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Holidays.
Good
Happy
night. Thank you
holidays.
all.
Happy New Year.
Mhm.